She booked a private recital. I tuned the piano and heard everything. Some men live by the torque of a wrench or the bite of a blade. I live by a note settling into itself. I'm a piano technician. I carry mutes like soft sins and a hammer that persuades steel to relax. My hands smell of graphite and old felt. My pockets collect screws the size of secrets. People call me before a gala or after a tantrum. I've walked into rooms where the piano was the only honest thing, lit up like a confession, strings listening, waiting for someone to tell the truth through 20 tons of tension. My wife, Mara, believed music makes better promises than people do. She ran a boutique arts PR outfit, salon nights in borrowed penthouses, intimate showcase sets for donors who ask too much with a smile. We met in a church with a temperamental Steinway. I'd been hired to coax it out of sulking before a fundraiser. She marched down the aisle with a clipboard and a problem, and I fell in love precisely 3 seconds after she said, "Can you make the middle register stop sounding like someone's lying?" "I can make it sound like whoever you want," I said, and when I pulled the fallboard to show her the action, she stood close enough that the air changed temperature. She took a key in her fingertip and pressed down slow, like she was testing the hinge of a secret. "That," she said when the note bloomed, "is what yes sounds like." Back then we lived in a third-floor walk-up with a window that looked like a painting if you were kind. On Fridays we played a game. I'd bring home something the color of hunger, heirloom tomatoes like bruised sunsets, peaches with a perfume that dared you to be decent, and she'd choose a record to make our tiny kitchen feel like the last good place on earth. We learned each other in the steady hum of small evenings. She'd sit on the counter, bare legs swinging, my shirt worn like a promise, champagne sweating quietly between her knees, and watch me come back from the day. When I washed my hands, she'd dry them, rubbing each finger until the memory of felt let go. We were never loud about our appetite. We just got very, very fluent. The first wrong note wasn't a sound at all. It was a key on her ring I didn't recognize. Not a mystery, that happens. She rotated venues like outfits, but it was how she took it off at night that got me. She used to drop her ring on the dish with a cheerful clink, one metal voice in a chorus. Now she slid the new one under a coaster as if it needed to be kept warm. "What's the gig?" I asked, tapping the rim of the dish with a spoon. "Donor night," she said, too breezy. "A private recital for 2 interested patrons. I'm courting a pianist the foundation is wild about." She was excited and pretending it was only professional. Mara loved artists the way firefighters love flames, practically with awe and with rules that only hold until heat asks for more. "Anyone I know." "Luca," she said, and there was a gust of wind in the name. I'd tuned for him once. He was famous for playing Debussy as if Debussy had written it for someone he couldn't have. He was also famous for sleeping with applause. "Nice hands," I said, because that was safer than yes or no. She kissed my cheek and stole a slice of peach I was trying to make last. "Keep yours," she murmured. "I need you to tune the venue's grand on Thursday." "Same day as your salon." "Same evening," she corrected, and I heard the hinge strain. The penthouse on the booking sheet belonged to a couple who liked to pretend the city was theirs. I knew the Steinway they borrowed from a rental house. Big voice, suspicious of humidity, lid that insisted on being admired. I arrived 2 hours early with my kit and my habit of minding my own business. The elevator opened on the kind of living room that never forgave fingerprints. The piano waited by a wall of glass, its black flank reflecting a skyline that thought it was a costume. Candles crouched on every surface like expensive intentions. "Perfect," came Mara's voice from the hall. I could tell it was hers before I turned. That's how the body files what it loves. She was in a black dress that didn't make promises it couldn't keep, a thin gold chain catching the light at her throat. Beside her, Luca had the head tilt of a man who expects rooms to rearrange for him. "Evan," she said to me with a smile that kept the part I wanted, "you're here early." "So are you," I said, because it tasted better than hello. "We need you," Luca said, tapping the closed lid with 2 fingers. "Musicians touch pianos the way priests touch altars. She's moody." "She'll behave," I said to the piano and opened her up. Tuning is half posture, half patience. You mute the strings you aren't listening to, invite the one you've chosen into a conversation, and make micro-adjustments until the room goes quiet in a very specific way. I worked through the stretch, my hammer a metronome, my ear the kind of instrument you can't insure. They rehearsed in the next room, voices low, shoes whispering on wood, the rustle of a dress trying to be polite. I stuck to the unisons and tried not to hear the part of me that was already at the door, just to look. A piano lets you know when the room changes. The sound lives in air. When breath goes shallow nearby, the note falters like it wants to take sides. By the time I hit the top octave, the light behind me had shifted. I stopped pretending not to listen. He was telling a story about a festival in Sardinia, how the audience held its breath during the last page of the Ravel. She was laughing in that low way that means yes before the question. I dropped a mute and heard her say softly, "Again," the word musicians use to reinvent a moment. Again is a dangerous word when you're not talking about music. When I finished, I eased the fallboard down and wiped fingerprints I hadn't left. Mara came to the bench and lifted her hand toward the keys, but she didn't play. She looked at me instead. "She's perfect," she said. "Thank you." Luca took my elbow like we were suddenly friends. "Stay," he said. "Have a glass after the donors leave." "Technicians vanish," I said. "We're like stagehands. If you see us, something went wrong." I packed my kit and refused to glance at the pomegranate scarf looped over a chair. Hers, the one she wore when she wanted the room to admit it had been looking already. At home, I took apart my hammer and cleaned a thread that didn't need cleaning. I told myself this was discipline, not fear. When Mara came in after midnight, she smelled of bergamot and applause. She sat at the foot of the bed and touched my ankle through the blanket. That used to be our way of pulling each other back from the cliff of sleep to kiss like people with all the time in the world. This time she left her hand there like a truce flag. "Big checks," she said. "Great press, he's better up close." "I know," I said into the dark. "Don't be unfair," she whispered. "I'm being musical," I said, stating a theme. We managed for a week the way people manage a hairline crack in glass. They drink elsewhere, they pretend it's character. Then the second booking came with a note, same venue, same artist, 2 guests. The key on her ring developed a vocabulary. It clicked when she picked it up the way a secret clicks in your chest. I waited a day, then texted the rental house and asked if they needed the same tech on Thursday. They did. This time I walked in knowing the room, the piano, and the shape of my own face when I didn't like a thing. Mara was a light in the pre-show scramble. Luca had his jacket off, sleeves rolled, wrists that made fancy watches feel unsure. I tuned like a man who couldn't afford to be sloppy about anything. When they started to rehearse a passage, she moved to the bench without thinking, shoulder to shoulder with him, hips aligned by habit rather than desire or because the body doesn't ask permission once it learns choreography. They looked good from the doorway. Some people do. Chemistry is a lighting designer in its own right. He played a slow Debussy. She closed her eyes and breathed on the off beats, her hand light on the fallboard as if to remind the instrument to hush when the line did. The intimacy was not obscene. It was more dangerous than that. It was beautiful. YouTube would approve of what happened next only because the camera of the world didn't. She opened her eyes at the cadence and looked at him the way one looks at a view you didn't expect. He kissed her. It wasn't hungry, it was inevitable. The kiss lasted the length of a bar, long enough to have rhythm, short enough to deny. They pulled apart with the exact civil composure of two people aware of windows. I left before anyone could say my name. That night I wrote a letter the way I write voicing notes, firm, patient, true as I could manage. I told her I'd heard something that asked for honesty. I told her I wasn't packing a suitcase, but I was packing a boundary. I told her that if she wanted to try, I would tune until the instrument we shared sounded like itself again, not like a copy pressed into another performance. I slid the letter into a manila envelope and placed it on the kitchen counter under the dish where the new key slept. She read it standing up, shoulders high, chain catching kitchen light, lipstick asking to be forgiven for being very good at its job. "I can explain," she tried, and then she didn't. "We are not children. We know the difference between an explanation and a script." "I don't need details," I said. "I need music that belongs to us." She sat, that was already a choice. "It felt like standing in the wings again," she said quietly. "Like being the moment before anything. You know that heat." "I build stages for that heat," I said. "I also take them down every night." "I kissed him," she said. "Twice. It was," she groped for the word and caught the worst one. "Harmless." "Then cancel it," I said. "Make it harmless by stopping. Ask me to stay. I will." She looked like I'd handed her a heavy instrument and asked her to carry it without dropping a single note. "What if I say I don't know how?" she whispered. "Then we learn," I said. "Or we don't. But we don't keep pretending the note is in tune when it is." She canceled the third salon. Publicly, she wrote something about scheduling and a venue conflict. Privately, she wrote Luca a message I didn't read. We slept on opposite shores of the same bed for a while. We touched like people who respect a bruise. I brought home a stack of worn music, the easy kind that teaches your hands to trust weight again. In the evenings, we went to our friend's bar where an old upright leaned in the corner with a cigarette voice. I tuned it once a month in return for whiskey and mercy. After closing, I showed Mara how to play a scale with her wrist loose and her finger pads telling the key a secret instead of a demand. She laughed when a note surprised her by being clean. Sometimes, when no one looked, I let my hand cradle hers and guide the phrase. It's a holy sort of touch, the kind you could show a censor, contact that says I'm here and I won't push. We weren't perfect. Some afternoons I'd catch her staring at the middle distance with the look of a woman playing a scene forward and backward until the edit is crueler than the take. Some mornings she'd catch me staring at my tuning hammer like it was a ritual that had failed me. We went to therapy, which is like taking the action out of a piano and laying every hammer on the bench while someone asks if you're sure you want to put it back the same way. We decided not to change the key, just the touch. Months later, she booked a salon again. Different artists, different donors, different penthouse. She asked if I was up for tuning. It wasn't a test. It was a stage we could both stand on. I said yes on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of yes that only exists after a no that mattered. When I arrived, the new piano needed love and a little humility. I gave it both. The artist ran scales with a seriousness that made me like him. The donors arrived damp with summer and opinions. And Mara walked in wearing blue, the color that happens when midnight drinks water. She twined through the room working names like a melody you can hum after one listen. I watched her from the curve of the instrument while I put my kit away. She saw me see her, and smiled with the exact half-inch of mouth that means thank you in our private grammar. Midway through the set, The artist asked if anyone wanted to sit close while he played a piece composed on a train. Mara took the bench beside him, but she didn't look at him. She looked at me. When the melody crested, her shoulder brushed his because physics required it, and then she settled a breath's width apart. I became aware of my hands in my pockets, not because they itched to hold anything, but because they were steady. After the donors slipped into cars, the apartment exhaled. Candles made peace with being put out. I checked dampers out of habit and waited by the piano like a man who doesn't need to be dramatic to deserve the last word. She came over and rested her fingers on middle C the way you rest them on a sleeping animal. "We okay?" she asked. "We are in tune," I said, "and we can stay that way if we keep listening." She nodded. "One condition," she said. "What's that?" "Teach me the quiet pedal again," she said, meaning the unicorda, the left pedal that shifts the action so the hammer hits one string instead of three. I think I forgot how to use it. In life. So I did, there in the expensive hush, just the two of us by the big black river of a piano. I placed her foot where it belonged, and I showed her how little you have to move to make the whole instrument softer. Not weak. Soft. The kind of soft you lean toward. When we got home that night, we didn't perform reunion. We did what we used to do. She sat on the counter in one of my shirts, legs bare, summer on her mouth. I cut peaches. She dried my hands and took her time. We kissed without making it a thesis. Later, in bed, we treated each other like a phrase you don't rush. The camera could have stayed in the room and no one would have written a letter. Skin, breath. The way she caught my wrist and then let go at the right second. It was the PG-13 version of mercy, and I'll take it. I still tune for rooms that pretend to own music. I still step into apartments where windows think they're oceans and people pretend candles are consent. But when a pianist sits down and breathes like he's the only man who's ever learned to use his hands, I smile a little and check the hammers like a professional. The piano under my care is faithful because I ask it to be, and I am faithful because I choose it. When Mara laughs from the doorway and I hear that particular bit of wind in it, I don't flinch. I listen, and the note holds.